well aware of, I'm sure, if we're on this call. And so we like to think about it as we kind of have these two parent organizations and partnerships for parks. We are the child, and we have bits and pieces of City Parks Foundation as well as New York City Parks. But ultimately, our mission is to support folks, a growing network of open space and public space champions across New York City, all five boroughs, to do volunteer activations and stewardship work in your local communities. And so we're really excited to be here with you all today. And with that, we can go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So we support our volunteer networks, our community partners in a variety of ways. First and foremost, through beautification projects and stewardship projects, which we call It's My Park projects. Some of you might be familiar with It's My Park program. We mobilize and help support tens of thousands of volunteers every single year through the It's My Park projects, doing everything from, cleanups to painting fences, relining basketball courts, all sorts of different stuff like that. Really finding ways and giving folks opportunities to connect and take care of their local parks and open spaces. We also offer trainings through the Partnerships Academy program. These are virtual trainings, webinars kind of like this on a variety of topics, as well as in-person trainings actually in parks and gardens on everything from, planting tips to, things you should be aware of if you're considering to become a 501c3. So really run the gamut there in terms of resources. We also offer staff support through our community engagement coordinators. I know that Green Thumb also has community engagement coordinators. So we kind of borrowed that language, I guess. But there's a community engagement coordinator for every single community district or community board, if you want to think of it that way, in every single district all across the five boroughs. And so if for whatever reason you're doing something in a park or dealing with sort of parks admin and it goes beyond the scope of what you do in Green Thumb and you're part of our network, we have community engagement coordinators to support you in that work. We also offer community coaching through our Catalyst program, which is a little bit more in-depth, like community building or sort of placekeeping or placemaking, thinking about areas of our city that have been neglected historically over time, oftentimes low-income Black and brown communities, right? Areas of the city that deserve a little more love and attention than they've historically gotten, and really trying to lay the groundwork and work with community members there to build up to something like a Friends of Parks group, Friends of so-and-so park, or whatever that may be. But really trying to provide a targeted influx of resources and support to help get things off the ground and give people a foothold to do the types of work they want to see happen in their community. And then lastly, we've got what we're here to talk about today, which is our grants program. And I specifically oversee the New York City Green Fund Grassroots program, which we're going to talk about more in just a minute. But if you're interested in any of this, when slides are sent around, which I believe they will be, you can click this link here to subscribe to our Partnerships for Parks newsletter. It's a great place to find out all sorts of information about upcoming opportunities and events. But funding opportunities, I know that's what we're all here for. We're here to make it rain, right? So let's talk about that money. Next slide, please. So the New York City Green Fund Grassroots program is intended to advance the viability of grassroots initiatives across parks and open spaces in all five boroughs and to foster a resilient network of equitable public green spaces. There's a lot there, but I always like to really ground us in this vision statement. I won't dig into all of this too much, but I want to highlight parks and open spaces. Our name might be Partnerships for Parks, but we support community gardens and all sorts of open public spaces across New York City, whether that be plazas or open streets, waterfronts, folks who just want to care for street trees, for example, all these different spaces, because we recognize, to get into the next piece, that's part of what it means to build a resilient network of equitable public green spaces, right? Not every community has the kind of lush, picturesque, stereotypical parks that we think of with the big lawns and big trees, right? Some of our parks look a little bit more different with concrete, or maybe folks don't have parks at all, but they do have access to open streets now or to a plaza where folks can gather and engage each other in community. So I want everybody to know that whether you're a Green Thumb Garden, or maybe you have friends who do other different types of work, if it's happening in open public space, this is a program for you. Next. Just a little bit of info. We run this program 2 times a year. And in this last round, which just closed, was open the beginning of this year and closed, and people are being paid out now. We funded 58 groups and distributed $343,000. So really, really proud of this number, and we're aiming for similar numbers in this next round that I'm about to be talking with you all about. But before I get into the numbers of everything and the nitty gritty, I just want to shout out some of the wonderful, wonderful groups that make up our network of community partners. You all may recognize some of the different groups here. I know Kelly Street Garden is a group that a lot of folks know. And there are lots and lots of Green Thumb Gardens actually that are part of our network and receive grants through our program. So whether you see someone you know up here or not, I just always like to take a second to shout out the folks who are really, really doing the work. Everything I do is really just about putting resources into the hands of people who know what their communities need. And with that, when can you take the leap and actually submit an application? Well, our fall 2024 round is about to open very soon. Tentatively, we're looking at Wednesday, July 10th. So coming up here in just a couple of weeks. And there will be roughly 6 weeks, a little bit under that, with the application closing Friday, August 16th. And we'll have links in the coming slides and will be shared around for where you can actually access the application. But those are the big dates to know: opening up July 10th and closing Friday, August 16th. So you might be thinking, this sounds great. I love money. I love grants. I love getting grants and getting money. But how do I know if this is for me? Well, we have a pretty useful eligibility checklist. This information is part of our info sessions, which I'll be talking about a little bit later on. But really, it's pretty simple. There's a lot of text here, but I'm going to walk you through it. In order to be eligible to apply for this program, you must be part of a group or organization. And we define that as 2 or more people. I think that's something that I see Jose nodding along, that I think our programs share. But the one thing I want to shout out is, while a group can be 2 or more people, that does mean that if you're an individual solo rider, lone ranger, then unfortunately you're not eligible. But get a couple of friends together, and you can take your shot. Applicants also do not need to be a 501c3 in order to apply. We get this question all the time. You do not need to be a registered nonprofit in order to apply for this opportunity. However, LLCs and 501c4s are not eligible to apply, but I don't think that probably applies to most folks in this room. Also, your annual operating budget must be less than $175,000 for the most recently completed fiscal year. Now, that's a lot of like jargon and accounting ease, but what that really means is look at all of your expenses from last year, if it helps you think of it this way. Think about all your expenses from last year, and as long as that was less than $175,000, you're in the clear. But that annual operating budget language is going to become important in one of our upcoming slides. So just flag that. I just see a question in the chat that I'll just address right now. We call it the fall 2024 round because funding for this program would be dispersed the end of October, November. But you have a year to use the funds. So you would have a full calendar year. So you could apply for something that you want to do next spring, and that would be totally fine. But the last piece on eligibility that we just want to call out, because we do have so many Green Thumb groups in our network: if you have received a grant from PFP or City Parks Foundation since 2020, all of your interim and final reports must be submitted prior to applying. So if you're someone who's worked with us in the past, just make sure that you've got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and that we've got everything we need before you put in a new application. And technically, there is one final thing on our eligibility checklist that I left off for this presentation, which is that we really want to make sure we're funding groups that have a strong connection to the communities they're working in and have a history of doing this kind of work in open public spaces before. But I'm speaking to Green Thumb folks. Y'all are obviously connected to your community. You obviously have been doing this before. So you all obviously qualify on that front. We can go to the next slide now. So how much can you actually receive from our program? And I want to acknowledge right off the bat that this is a little bit wonky. We get into this in much more depth in our info sessions, which I'll be talking about at the end of this presentation. But in general, if your annual operating budget for last year was less than $10,000. So again, we're thinking about all your expenses, all the money you spent on plants and tools and all of that. If all that added up is less than $10,000, you can apply for up to 2,500. And that's the limit there. Now, if your budget is over $10,000, well, then you can actually apply for up to 25% of what your expenses were last year. So let's say last year you spent $20,000, right? That was what your total budget was for all your expenses last year. You could apply for up to 25% of that, which would be $5,000. I'm not going to make you all do math in the middle of the day like that, but you could apply for up to $5,000. And so we do this because obviously $175,000 upper limit is quite a high limit. So we want to make sure that we're providing something that feels like it's flexible and really meets the needs of people no matter where you are, whether you're a brand new group just starting out, or maybe you've been around a while, but you operate entirely on small dollar donations from volunteers, or you're someone who's a little bit more established and you're looking to take things to the next level. We want our program to be flexible, and that's why we've built things out in this kind of tiered system. I know it can be a little bit confusing, but again, attend an info session, be in touch with us. I promise we can help you figure it out. Next slide, please. And so then you're saying, okay, great, Zach, I know I'm eligible now. I know roughly about how much money I can get, but what can I use it on? So we've got this list here of what we can fund and what we can't. And they're broad categories, but in general, any eligible expenses, what you could actually use the funding for, going to be things like equipment, tools, plant material, supplies. That could even be you're hosting a barbecue for volunteers or something like that. Supplies would cover that. T-shirts for folks, right? Any of that sort of stuff covered in that first bullet point. Also, payments to consultants or vendors, contractors, or professional fees. Now, I know that Green Thumb Gardens, there's some specifications, so always make sure you're in touch with your Green Thumb CECs and checking back with your Green Thumb manual to make sure that you're actually contracting for things that you're allowed to contract for. But we can pay out to contractors and vendors. That would include folks like hiring a musician to come to your garden opening, right? All of those things are covered. We also allow for funding of part-time and seasonal staffing costs. So if you have actual paid staff, you can use funding for that, as well as stipends of up to $600 per person. So maybe you want to pay some local folks, young people in your neighborhood to help out every couple of weeks through the summer. You could pay for stipends in that way. Marketing and outreach costs as well, and one-time event insurance. All of these things are totally cool. Now, ineligible expenses, maintenance services conducted by anyone other than volunteers or interns. So you can't simply pay someone to come in and do all of your planting and community gardening for you. That's basically what that means. We're not, now, if they're staff, it's a little bit different, obviously, but this applies more to park groups, right? We don't want people paying someone to come around and rake all the leaves for them. That's not what this is about. We're also not going to pay for your office overhead. We're not going to pay your rent, right? We're not going to pay you to buy materials to go out and promote a political candidate. You also can't be lobbying people over political issues, and we're not going to pay your bills if you get sued. So pretty broad categories, but I think we can all understand why we've got those there. Next slide, and I'm coming up to the end of my time. So with all of that, you know the broad basics of what the Green Fund Grassroots program is. But as I've said, there's so much more information, so much more detail. We'll be sharing at the end of this slide, at the end of this presentation, some opportunities that we have coming up. Once we launch on July 10th, we will be doing weekly info sessions. They're an hour and a half, and I literally walk you through every step of the application with screenshots. So it's exactly what you'll be seeing, and I will talk you through what we expect, what we're hoping to see from you, and what makes a really successful application. So if you're interested in applying, I highly, highly recommend that you take us up on one of those info sessions. And I'll flag that after you attend an info session, you're also given the ability, anyone who wants, to reach out and book a one-on-one consultation with me, which is essentially like if you ever had a teacher who let you turn in a first draft of a paper, it's the exact same thing. We'll spend 30 minutes and I will walk through a rough draft of your grant application and flag anything for you that I think might be a problem or that you might be misunderstanding. But none of that is available or on the table until you attend one of those info sessions. So please pay attention to the dates that we'll have at the end of this slideshow. And yeah, really appreciate the time, y'all. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jose.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. So again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Doblez. I'm the Vice President of Programs for Citizens Committee for New York City. And we're approaching our 50th birthday. We've been around since 1975. And really, our job as an organization is we're a micro granting organization. So we give small grants to community leaders to really take the communities they have and transform them into the ones they want, right? And it's a broad scope of things that fall under that spectrum of community leaders. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Fabio. Right here is a breakdown sort of where all of our grants exist. We are in every city council district. Last year, we gave out around $750,000 in awards. Now, this isn't exclusively for community gardens, right? Folks have applied for all different types of projects. We don't sort of prescribe to folks what they should be submitting projects on. As Zach mentioned, we trust folks to be experts on their community. So they apply for whatever projects they see fit to really sort of improve their neighborhood. But just for folks to get a sense, we gave out grants to 20 community gardens last year, specifically. And 66% of all of our folks are volunteers. And like I said, we have grants all over the city. And I think, I'm not sure about this year, but last year for sure, we were in every city council district. Fabiola, if you please can switch me over. Thank you. All right, so there's the grant. This is what we're talking about, right? So all of you folks, I'm assuming a majority of folks are eligible for our community leaders grant. And this is a grant up to $3,000. The criteria has to take place in New York City, your work. Groups of 2 or more people, very similar to what Zach described in their eligibility requirements. We don't fund individuals, but 2 or more folks with a vision or a passion for something they want to do can apply. 501c3 is not required. You don't need to be a nonprofit. If you are a nonprofit, your operating budget has to be under $150,000. So you have to be a relatively small nonprofit. One thing that kind of bypasses the budget requirement is schools. So schools are all eligible to apply regardless of the budget requirements. So if folks have PTAs that are interested in getting involved in this kind of work, or just faculty want to do stuff, we have folks who have started hydroponics labs. So those kind of things, or even just sort of rehabilitated their garden and built planted vegetables in the front lawn and stuff like that. Folks have applied for those kind of things for schools. And no fraternal partisan organizations are eligible, but the most important thing about this grant, which is not on this slide, I guess we should put it, but I like saying it as like a little sleeper hit, is you can submit as many projects as you want for this grant. So for example, if your garden or your project, whatever you're doing, you have 6 different ideas that need funding, submit 6 different applications, right? Submit an application for every idea you have. Now, I'll be honest with you. Very rarely do we give out multiple grants, but this year we have a handful of folks, like around 4 or 5 folks, who have gotten multiple awards for different projects that they're doing, right? So it's something to think about. You can submit as many as ideas as you have, or project ideas. You can submit those applications. Just make sure that they're distinct ideas, right? And that's sort of one of the things that I love about this, is that folks can kind of just brainstorm and dream a little bit. Next slide, Fabiola. All right, this is our process. It's pretty simple. Right now, we only have 1 cycle. The grant, our 2025 grant period will start November 4th and go through March 7th. Folks will hear a decision by the summer of 2025. If it goes along this sort of grant cycle, folks will be hearing back from us in July, and you'll have 11 months to use the funding. Right, so that's basically, and you'll receive the funding probably in the fall, and you'll have 11 months to review the funding. As I mentioned before, you can apply for multiple projects, and you can apply again every year. One of the things, and okay, well, this is being recorded, so it's fine. I can't say off the record because it is clearly on the record. But one of the things we love to see is if you receive a grant from us, it's more than likely you're really sort of competitive moving future years, because we love to see folks build on that initial investment, right? So if we give you a grant and you do the final report and things are really successful, and then you have a new vision of like, hey, we did this last year, but we really want to build on that and do something else that just has a larger impact, we typically will sort of re-up with folks. So because we love to see that growth, right? And we love folks to kind of dream big in that way. So if you get a grant from us, and it looks like you're really building on the success of the previous year, that kind of puts you a leg up over all the other applicants. Next slide, please, Fabiola. Thank you. Oh, so we haven't really kicked off our office hours and info sessions yet, but starting in October, what we have set up is every Wednesday at 3 p.m., there's a Zoom info session, and it's like 90 minutes where we walk through the app, very similar to Zach's process. We walk through the application, we give you folks sample applications so you can kind of see what a strong application looks like, and then you can schedule one-on-ones, and you can do that all through our website. So there's just a link and you can just join in, and it'll probably kick off in October, and then it'll go all through February. And it's every week, every Wednesday at 3, there'll be an info session that folks can sign up for. And then you can also hit me up, and my contact info will be coming up soon. You can hit me up and we can set up a time to kind of talk and brainstorm together. We're always, for us, many of our grantees, this is the first grant they've ever received, right? Like I said, 66% of our folks are volunteers. So we really want to make this accessible process, right? Like, I'm not looking for professional grant writers. I'm not looking for anything fancy. I really just want to know what you want to do and why it matters, right? And so I want to help you kind of brainstorm around that. And so eventually we'll give you more specific dates, but in October is definitely when those things will kick off. And I think, Fabiola, I might have one more. I'm not sure. It might just be me. Oh, there you go. It's me. All right, cool. I was guessing that was next. I wasn't sure. So this is my contact information. That's my email. That's our organization website where you can find more information. Oh, and okay. If you do go to citizensnyc.org, there's a page there, a grantee page, where you can actually see everyone we've given an award to and a project snapshot. So it'll give you a sense of the kind of things we award, right? And the kind of things we're looking for, the kind of projects. You can even filter out my environmental-based projects. So you kind of see how folks have framed their work, just kind of get a taste of the kind of things that we're funding. As I said, I have a team of 3. There's me and 2 other folks who review all these applications. So if you can get in contact with one of us, that's great, because we can all walk you through it. But like I said, this is all my information. It's really simple, very straightforward. The application is probably 4 pages long and 3 narrative questions, then a bunch of pull-down responses that are just like demographic information that we need to report on. But we've tried to really make it streamlined for folks, and just simplify the process as much as possible. And that's basically it. That's a quick overview of Citizens NYC. I think that's it, right? Fabiola, we're good?
Yes, we're good.
you.
And now we're gonna go to yes, this one.
This is our contact information. You already had Jose's, but you've got mine as well now. If you have any specific questions for me directly, you can feel free to reach out to me. But also, if you have any questions about the Green Fund, really the best place is to send to Green Fund Grassroots at cityparksfoundation.org. Everyone on our team has access to that email. So, that's really like the best place. But also feel free to reach out to me if you have specific questions you'd rather do it that way. You can also check out our website, partnershipsforparks.org. Don't be alarmed. It will take you to cityparksfoundation.org/. You're still in the right place. Yeah.
I think there's one more. Oops, there we go.
Yeah.
And your dates.
So these are our upcoming dates for info sessions. We're not nearly as consistent on the like every Wednesday, like Jose and their team are at Citizens Committee. We try to bounce things around. We've had feedback from folks in the past that it's difficult. Some people are like, well, I can never make a Monday, or I can never do a Thursday. And so we're doing different times. There's some in the evenings and some middle of the day. Yeah, and if for whatever reason none of these options work for you, feel free to reach out to us and we can always get you a recording or something like that. But I do highly encourage folks to attend yourself directly if you can, because that's the best way to like hear the questions that other folks are asking, you know, just be in the mix with everybody. But yeah, we're gonna have info sessions every week starting July 15th. So about a week after we launch, and going all the way through to the final week, August 12th, right there before the applications are due. So this is really like the best place to get all the information that you need.
Thank you, Zach and Jose. And now we go to questions. And Valerie, would you like to start moderating? And thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, so we got a couple questions. The first two, we have a general question. I am not sure at what capacity you guys are able to answer it, but I do want to vocalize it regardless. Colleen asks, well, Colleen states that they love that there's so much support for civic participation. They're hearing a lot of language about community members beautifying and maintaining their parks. They're a little confused as to why city government isn't just maintaining the parks at whole. Many people have full-time jobs, and it's very ineffective to expect citizens to do this work. I don't know if y'all have an answer for that, but didn't want to vocalize it.
Yeah, I'd love to give a quick response to that if that's cool, Jose, since it's about parks. Yeah, Kathleen, I completely agree with you. I would also love to know why. I'm fully speaking from the nonprofit side of things. I think that it is. I think it's a real challenge. You know, but I agree with your frustrations and that it is. You know, as our executive director of City Parks Foundation has said many times, volunteer work and nonprofit support should never be understood as a full substitute for full, robust city funding. And parks are part of our infrastructure, right? This is how we meet our climate goals. It's what it means to have a healthy, thriving community. Our tagline at Partnerships for Parks is "Thriving parks mean thriving communities." And if the only thing that we're doing is relying on folks in their free time after work or on the weekends to maintain this, I mean, yeah, it's a real problem. But that's where our grant, at least, it's not a long-term solution. But I tell everyone who talks to me that, hey, yeah, pay yourself, give yourself that stipend. You know, like it's not going to cover everything, but if you've got folks you work with, pay them well. And I hope that in some context, our grant provides people the means, and I hear this all the time of like everything I've been doing out of pocket. And this grant allows me to do that same stuff and at least not dip into my own resources directly. And so it's not a full answer to y'all. I would say to check out New Yorkers for Parks and the Play Fair Coalition as well, and some of the advocacy work that they've been doing around the city budget. That's a very live question right now, but I feel your frustration, and in whatever ways we can, we're here to support those groups.
Thank you, Zach. I have two questions of expense related. So Talia asks, would paying for extermination services be an eligible expense? Or how can it be framed to be included for a proposal?
So Valerie, you all might actually have a better answer to this. I think my general line is that extermination services would be eligible as long as like you're within the bounds of like working within Green Thumb and figuring out, you know, all of the pieces there. That's part of my answer to a lot of things. Because we're a public-private partnership, you got to make sure your permits and approvals and all that other sort of stuff is in order. You should be doing that anyway, but it's really important for our program since we are technically partially, you know, connected to a city agency. But what I would say to kind of get more substantively into the question, like a lot of our grant focuses on activations, how you're bringing a community together and sort of like what the work means to the open space that you're working in. And so, you know, it'll be important if you're interested in applying for extermination services that you're able to really like tell that story of like what type of a difference is this going to make in your space. there's the obvious, I get it, like pests are a problem, rats are a problem, you know, whatever it is, but really making sure you're clear in that narrative of how this work will allow you to bring community in a more meaningful way, I think would be important.
Thank you so much. As a community engagement coordinator, just want to vocalize that if you guys do private extermination, please let GTO, well, rather Hannah K know that private extermination will be happening because DOH cannot service while private exterminator is also doing the work at the garden. I would also like to add, if you guys do include extermination, don't just think of it of the garden, but also like the outside, like the community itself, like the street trees can be included. Like it doesn't have to be just solely on one issue. How can you connect and relate it to a broader issue that the neighborhood may be facing?
Valerie's speaking from a really good point here, I'll just say, because she just helped out as one of we have a pretty broad grant review committee of about 24 folks who collectively decide on all of our grants. And Valerie helped us out as one of our reviewers from the Green Thumb side of things this last round. So she knows what she's talking about and what really makes a difference to that committee panel. So yeah, thumbs up there.
Thank you. The second question was, can the services of a hired arborist qualify for a community garden?
I would say yes. But again, similarly to, the piece about extermination, I think anytime it's like you're addressing sort of like maybe a little bit more of like a routine maintenance need, I think it's going to be really important that you are articulating what the impact is on your space, but also like, what's your plan to like bring volunteers in other ways, right? Because ultimately it's about building a resilient and growing kind of network. That's really part of our vision, right? And so it's not to say that the tree pruning is not important at all. It is. But it's important to always be thinking about, how is this a need in the community or in the space I'm in? And what does this enable me to do? What is the next step beyond this kind of like front and center challenge that we've got?
Yeah, I would like to add an example. Loose example can be like emphasizing Tree Appreciation Day and sharing like, oh, a lot of the space in our garden is taken up by the shade. Pruning is so good and helpful for the tree itself, and making it into a community event rather than just requesting arborist pruner, rat pruner. Another question that we received was, does Citizens Committee, oh wait, no, that's not it. Another question we received, they asked if y'all will be talking about the IOBY option today, or is that going to be in a later forum?
So I don't have the space really to get into the IOB crowdfunding challenge that we offer in this space, but we do have an upcoming Q&A that will be happening July 17th, where my colleague Kuros Maksudi will be going through everything you need to know about IOB crowdfunding. That program is happening on a rolling basis, so there are limited spots, but there's no like application cutoff date. And so, yeah, keep your eye out for the 17th. I will share a link to sign up for that info session in the chat now if folks are interested. But for those who aren't aware, we partner with IOB, which is a crowdfunding platform similar to GoFundMe, but we offer matching funds of up to $2,500. So every dollar that you get donated, we will match it dollar for dollar. And for up to $3,000 if you are in an environmental justice area, which we can talk about how to find that out and figure that out. But yeah, great way to double the money that you're receiving from your volunteers and donations and all that sort of stuff. And more info, obviously, at the info session.
Those are all the questions that I've received so far. Oh, there's a new one, Shirley. Yes, thank you. If we are having a problem with the variegants outside of our garden, one suggestion given by the police is that we install cameras. Is that a project we can request funding for?
Jose, I don't know if you maybe wanted to take, I feel like that could go for either of us.
Yeah. Yes. So this is good. No, whatever. I'm gonna say what I have to say, but it's gonna be whatever. Technically, yes, you could apply for that. Organizationally, though, I don't think we put that strong on our list of things to kind of prioritize funding for. It's sort of increasing surveillance opportunities, just sort of like just where we stand politically as an organization. And I understand that's an important thing, but I would say it probably wouldn't be very competitive as part of our grant if that was sort of something that was built into the application, is to increase sort of cameras.
I would echo that similarly. I think that again, so much of what we're talking about is activation of community space and bringing folks in. On the flip side, to offer a different kind of vision of how you might approach this, we had a group out in Staten Island that was concerned about folks using space in like unintended ways in their community garden, drug use and other types of things, people sleeping in the garden in ways that were causing problems, causing difficulties. And one of the things that I know they're doing is like they partnered up with some local service providers, folks doing Narcan trainings, folks doing who specialize in outreach to unhoused people, homeless folks, right? And really that was like part of their narrative. That was like, here's a thing, we're not sure entirely what to do about it, but we're interested in talking to people who are, and we could use funding to help set up some of these meetings and to do this kind of work and to pay people for their time. And I think that's the type of activation and like really building into a community that would probably be more successful and more compelling than just cameras.
I co-sign Zach's comment there that would be a really compelling application to say we want funding to partner with service providers or just sort of different harm reduction services to address that issue. That'd be super competitive.
Will that be all the questions for today? Yes, Valerie?
As of now in the chat, yes. But if you guys need a moment.
Shirley had a follow-up.
Yeah, and let's wait for that. Thank you. Oh, I'm adding another person, Linda. Hey, Linda, we're in the Q&A portion. So if you have any questions before we end the session, please put it in the chat. Or say it verbally if you want.
Shirley, I see your follow-up. I'm not reading it as a question, I suppose. I think that's where the confusion's coming in. I guess you're asking if you could partner with the police in coming up with alternatives. Yeah, I think what Jose and I are both trying to say is I don't think there's anything in what you're thinking that is like ineligible by any means. I think we would just, I'm going to risk speaking for both of us, Jose, that I think we would both probably encourage you to think about who are the organizations, who are the folks in your community directly working with people who you're concerned about, and trying to get maybe a little bit more at some of the root issues there, and thinking about how this challenge might be an opportunity to address some larger things going on in your community. And if the police are a way that that's an outlet that helps you think about that, then that potentially could work. But I think what we're really looking for, again, speaking to Green Fund stuff, is about community activations. And we talk about the public. I certainly talk about the public all the time, and what the public means, and who has access to the public and who doesn't have access to the public, and all the challenges that being in public can bring. But I think that's what we would encourage you to think through. And whoever you would partner with to think through that, is your own prerogative, certainly. But as long as you're approaching it from that mindset, I think that would help you be more competitive. Yeah.
And then Jose says that they're co-signing everything Zach says. That's awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Yes, thank you so much, Jose and Zach. It was a super thorough grant info in a nutshell. That was like very good. And thank you very much for being here today with us. I'm gonna stop the recording and then I'm gonna make a short announcement about Green Thumb workshops. So just bear with me.